Will the Falcons pass rush get home against PJ Walker and the Carolina Panthers? And is the pistol formation the next evolution of the Falcons offense?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, and a.k.a. the very humble host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So we thank you guys for making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. Of course, it's free and available Monday through Friday on a variety of podcast platforms, including Apple, Odyssey, Google, Spotify, and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Falcons on YouTube. Give us a like when you do, and you will get the video version of the podcast the night before the audio drops. So today is our Q&A All-22 review plus keys to victory. Given the short week, we're changing the format and having Jarvis Davis, the co-host of ATL Day Ones on the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast feed, joining us today to give his key to victory. We'll be talking with Jarvis very shortly about the need for the pass rush to sort of step up in this game against Carolina and get home after a lackluster performance against the Chargers and previous games. And then later in the episode, we'll get into the All-22 review, and I'll be focusing on the pistol formation and the shotgun as part of this offense's potential evolution. And then we'll get into a Q&A portion. We'll talk a little bit about Ridder versus Mariota, Arthur Smith's play calling, all that and more. So without further ado, let's jump into that conversation right now with Jarvis Davis of ATL Day Ones. All right, everyone, we are back with another illustrious guest, none other than Jarvis Davis of the ATL Day Ones podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast feed, one of 3 shows on that feed. Of course, he's also the co-host of the Locked On Sports Atlanta and Locked On Falcons postcast that he does with myself every Sunday. And this week, it won't be on Sunday. We'll be doing that Thursday evening.
Yes.
So make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube. Hit that bell so that you know when we go live. And because it's a short week, normally we have Jarvis on the pod on Friday to give sort of one key to victory, sort of preempt us for, Sunday's matchup. One of the things that we will talk about in those postcasts. But since we got a short week, we got to do it a little bit earlier. So we're coming at you in the middle of the week here with Jarvis. And Jarvis, as I always ask you, sort of for you, what is one key to victory for this Falcon team on Thursday night against this Carolina Panthers?
To be honest with you, man, I have to start with the defense, right? Because that's one of the things that I felt like I think they're a lot better than what we saw last. Let me say not a lot better. I'm over exaggerating there. Let me keep it a buck for a second. So I think that they are marginally better than what we saw last week. I think there was a lull there. I think there are some opportunities for some guys to be able to get home, and I don't think the Falcons necessarily took advantage of that, especially, with a guy like Jamari Sawyer, although I think he is an excellent draft pick, and I think that the Chargers got some value there. But when you talk about him playing left tackle, I thought he projected to be more sort of a guard from a standpoint. I think he's more of a closet guy, a phone booth guy. Him being out on the edge like that, I think that there should have been some opportunities for the Falcons to take advantage of that, and they obviously didn't do that. So I think the defense has to put some pressure on PJ Walker, and I think they're going to have plenty of opportunities to force him to make mistakes and put him on the ground, because he's a guy that we learned that he's not going to necessarily take off and run with the football. He's looking to throw that bad boy. So guys like that tend to hold on to the football. So I think that the Falcons have to get to the quarterback, whether that's playing Arnold Ebiketie more and getting him some more opportunities to rush the passer on 3rd and long or passing situations, or it's getting D'Angelo Malone in there as well and getting those guys, the guys that you drafted to rush the quarterback, get them in there more.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see if the Falcons dial up a lot more pressure this time around against the Panthers team. I'm just like skimming through my notes and looking at all the times when they brought pressure, and it was kind of a mixed bag
Right.
in
Yeah.
the most recent game. Um, as you say, like, I don't know if we can trust this pass rush just to rush with four guys and be able to
Yeah.
get home
Gotta
consistently.
get
Like
credit with it. Yep.
they haven't really shown that the last couple of weeks. I don't think it's a coincidence that the pass rush has kind of died down this last couple of weeks, where we really haven't seen Grady Jarrett do a whole lot.
Right.
It just seems like far too often has been the case this season and in previous years, where if Grady Jarrett's not doing his thing, then there's really not a whole lot to write home about with this pass rush. So hopefully that will change, and if we can get that going against Carolina, that'll be great. If Dean Pease has to dial up more pressure in order to help facilitate that, I think they can do that. We'll have to sort of see if his concerns in the secondary lead him to be a little bit less aggressive that he would normally be
Right.
with a healthy AJ Terrell. So I'm very curious to see how this defense performs on this rematch. We know that DJ Moore had some success against them last time. And
To
it'll
say the
be
least.
it'll be a tall order to sort of keep him into check. So I'm very curious to see how this defense performs on Thursday night. But Jarvis, always appreciate you joining me, talking Falcons football and giving us these keys to victory for on a short week. Let the people know what you guys got going on for you over at Locked On Sports Atlanta.
Well, the Hawks are actually, getting their groove on. They beat the recently undefeated Milwaukee Bucks. So I was going to be talking about that. They got the Utah Jazz coming up a little bit later on. So we talk about the Hawks, and obviously we're going to be previewing Falcons big time as they play Thursday night. We're coming on after the game, the Locked On Falcons postcast. We might cuss. You know what I mean? You never know. You never know what's going to go down on the Falcons postcast. And this is going to be a late night version. Oh my goodness. If you're not there, like my man Aaron says, turn those notifications, hit that bell, turn those bad boys on so you can get it as soon as we go live. Check us out right there on Locked On Sports Atlanta. We'll tweet out the link. And if you're not on Twitter, just like I said, turn on notifications on and check us out right here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. It's going down. Late night edition, Locked On Falcons postcast.
All right. Thirsty Thursday. So we might have a couple drinks in us and see what we have to say after this Falcons Panthers game, win, lose, or draw. So we'll see what happens, guys. No promises. No promises on sobriety on that episode.
If the Falcons sack PJ Walker, man, I might just take a shot on air, man. That's how it's going. That's how I'm feeling right now. Like,
all right,
man, let's do it.
New drinking game. Take a shot every time the Falcons get a sack. You might be a little too sober this year.
You might be a designated driver around this one.
We'll see what happens, guys. Really appreciate you, Jarvis, joining me again, and we'll see what happens on Thursday night. Appreciate it, guys. So, guys, don't touch that dial just yet. There's more to come on today's episode, breaking down the All-22 from Week 9's loss to the Chargers, and we'll focus on the team's usage of pistol and shotgun formations as one way for this Falcons offense to evolve. But before we get there, I want to tell you about our proud sponsor, Simply Safe. I had a break-in way back in 2014, and I needed a security system after that event. And the thing that I eventually settled on Simply Safe. And the thing that initially attracted me to Simply Safe was how affordable they were. And the reason why I've maintained my relationship with Simply Safe these past 8 years is because I absolutely trust their service. I love how customizable they are. If you're looking for a bare bones security system, they got you covered. But if you want all the bells and whistles, you want the HD wireless security cameras, you want smoke leak detectors. If you live up north, maybe not this winter, but under another winter, you'd be worried about your pipes freezing. Well, Simply Safe has all the detectors that you need for all of that and more. Simply Safe's your safety is the only thing that matters to them. with their cutting edge technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents that will always have your back, dispatching police, first responders at the moment of a threat or emergency, even when you're not home or can't be reached. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl, and you will save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Just visit simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. And guys, I want to thank you for making Locked On Falcons your first listen. But for your second listen, why not check out Locked On Sports Today? From the games that matter to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes from the local experts and giving you those insights that only Locked On can provide by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So jumping into the All-22 review, I think last week's maybe on the All-22 review or another episode last week, again, they all blur together. I talked a little bit about how the Falcons could run out of shotgun as a way of evolving this offense, and the idea behind running out of shotgun, which is mostly the pistol formation, which is those shotgun plays where the running back lines up directly behind the quarterback. I think there's two main benefits for that. The first one being that if you run the ball out of shotgun, generally speaking, in shotgun, you will use 11 personnel, which is those 3 wide receiver sets. And theoretically, you should be able to run against lighter boxes because teams tend to deploy nickel formations and will have 6-man boxes against that 11 personnel. And the second reason is I think you would do a better job of integrating Marcus Mariota's running ability more into the offense, as well as benefiting Mariota in terms of your usage of play action passing. And we talked about this earlier in the season, I think around the Seattle game. We talked about Mariota's struggles, his tendencies to struggle when he has to turn his back to the defense when operating from under center, utilizing that play action passing attack. And while he's a little bit better running out of the shotgun and sort of doing those read option fakes and all those various things where he doesn't have to take his eyes off of the defense. So one of the things I wanted to do this week that we touched upon last week was kind of chart all the Falcons shotgun and pistol snaps. And so starting with the running game, the Falcons had 33 designed runs in this game. 16 of those came out of the pistol. 3 of those came out of the shotgun where the running back was lined up next to the quarterback rather than behind him. On those 16 pistol runs, the Falcons had a success rate of 75% running the football. Out of shotgun, that success rate was 100% on all those 3 runs. And then on every other run the Falcons had in this game, their success rate was 79%. So clearly running the football was not an issue in this game. The 3 shotgun runs were all out of 11 personnel, those 3 wide receiver sets. All of those went to Cordero Patterson. The 15 pistol runs, they featured 21 personnel 7 times. That means there's a fullback on the field. 11 personnel, those 3 wide receiver sets 5 times. 12 personnel, which is a two tight end set 3 times, and 22 personnel, which is a fullback and 2 tight ends 1 time. And notably, the 5 times they ran at 11 personnel, their success rate on those 5 runs was 100%. And the thing I noted, I think last week, was how against Carolina, Huntley was much more effective than Algier was running out of those shotgun and pistol situations. Well, that wasn't a problem for Tyler Algier this past week. He averaged 6.6 yards per carry on his pistol runs, on his 5 runs out of pistol, and had a 80% success rate. The only unsuccessful run he had on those 5 pistol runs was the final carry he had in the 4th quarter when the Falcons got the ball back on that first down, that 1st and 10. He, out of 21 personnel with the fullback on the field, the Falcons ran the ball. Algier only got 2 yards. That in that instance, Keith Smith missed his block on that particular play, and that defender was able, I think it was Derwin James, if I'm not mistaken, was able to avoid that block and make the tackle on Algier. And prior to that play, notably, when the Falcons were running out of 21 personnel out of pistol, it was primarily Cordero Patterson running it, and he had a 60% success rate on the 5 carries he had out of 21 personnel, in that pistol formation. They had one play where it was a quarterback keeper for Mariota with that 21 personnel. So you could use hindsight to nitpick a little bit and say maybe on that 1st and 10 on the final drive, that's an opportunity for Patterson to be on the field on that first down and get that carry out of 21 personnel versus Algier, where that potentially could have worked. But again, that's hindsight, that's nitpicking. What's notable to me when we continue to wrap up talking about the running game out of the pistol is that if you look at next gen stats, and they don't break it down by shotgun or under center or anything like that, but when you look at how many times they ran against 8 or more defenders based off of Next Gen Stats' GPS data. Patterson had 8 guys in the box on 38% of his runs, which is a high mark in the NFL, while Algier only had it on 10% of his runs. And I think that sort of illustrates what I'm talking about earlier, where, running out of that 11 personnel like Algier did tends to lighten the box, while running out of that 21 personnel tends to increase the box, because those are, base offense, base defense types of situations where defenses are going to be more inclined to stack the box. So, I think as far as the running game goes, this is kind of working for the Falcons. Obviously, they had a lot of success running the football, regardless of the formation that they were doing. But to me, this is a way that the Falcons could enhance their running game with teams facing them later in the season, who are going to know they're going to try to run the football and try to stack the box, but being able to play that shotgun pistol, go to their 11 personnel, and essentially, Kyle Pitts being a wide receiver in those situations, really making it kind of 10 personnel in that regard, I think could be an effective way. Now, what you need in order for that to be a threat is you need to have the passing game effective. And it really wasn't in this Chargers game when the Falcons were utilizing pistol or shotgun and Mariota was passing out of it. Throwing out a pistol, Mariota was 2 for 4 for 30 yards. He had 1 scramble for 5 yards. That gave him an overall success rate about 60% of those 5 plays. So that's a good number. One of those plays was that check down to Tyler Algier, where he sort of avoided the pressure and found Algier for a big play. But other than that, like that one play, it wasn't a whole lot to write home about with Mariota the pistol. And then the shotgun, it was worse. He was 8 for 17 passing for 62 yards. He was sacked twice, and he had an overall success rate on his dropbacks of 32%. And so, as I said earlier, this style of play should benefit Mariota as a runner and as a passer, but we haven't seen that. It didn't manifest itself against the Chargers. And so, one of the things that we're hoping to see more out of this offense, in the future, especially next year, particularly when they're running the under center stuff and they're inviting those extra defenders in the box, is being able to hit that deep ball down the throat, right? Those are the times where you want to dial out those shot plays. And obviously we need Mario to hit more of those. We've seen Zaccheaus and Bird, get open on a couple of those plays. But, in the future, to me, when I'm thinking about how to build the best version of this offense, like I kind of want more of a true deep threat burner type, a Will Fuller type of player that can play in that role and really cook for this offense, opposite Zaccheaus and London and Pitts as the Falcons' main options when they go to their 11 personnel in those sorts of situations. So that's something I would like to see in the future. Obviously, we will make do with whatever we have to do for the remainder of the season. I think Bird and Zaccheaus can provide you that, and also London and Pitts as well. So one of the things I'll be paying attention on Thursday, particularly when I get to watch the film over the weekend, is are the Falcons making strides? Is Mariota making strides as a passer? Because that was one of the things we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where it's like, there's a couple of weeks where I'm willing to give Mariota, 3 or 4 weeks to evolve this offense and show progress as a passer, and if he does, then, you will not at least hear me calling for Desmond Ridder. But we're now reaching, and I'm not gonna say this is the deadline or whatever, but like I do need to see more out of Mariota, and the bar isn't set really high. Like that success rate, instead of 32%, if it's 42%, I'll take that as a sign of progress, that this offense is evolving. And the calls for Desmond Ridder, at least from my end, I know for the rest of you will not be the case, but from my end will not be called. But if we're still looking at like a success rate, throwing out a shotgun, throwing out a pistol, in the 30s again this week, that to me is going to lead to concerns for myself about, whether or not the Falcons would benefit from a quarterback switch. And that's where we'll wrap up today's episode, talking about Desmond Ridder, getting into the Q&A portion of today's episode, and whether or not the struggles of the offensive line are a deterrent to playing Ridder, as well as we'll get into Arthur Smith's improved play calling and the things that I'm seeing in that regard, as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons All-22 Q&A episode, guys. But before we get there, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Blue Nile. Whether you're looking to pop the question, have a milestone that you want to celebrate, or you want to let your love sparkle, Blue Nile can help you. As the original online jeweler, Blue Nile offers the largest selection of diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. Blue Nile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. Their easy online tools let you choose the diamond shape, size, clarity, and setting style. Or maybe you're just looking for a fine piece of jewelry, but you're having trouble choosing, and Blue Nile has the jewelry experts available via phone, via chat, 24/7 to help you find that memorable gift that fits every budget. All you have to do to make your moment sparkle is go to BlueNile.com and use the code Locked On, and you'll save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BLUENILE.com. Code Locked On to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. The BlueNile.com, code Locked On. And guys, if you are loving what we're showing you here on Locked On Falcons, you can love what you're potentially going to be shown on Locked On Sports Atlanta with the Locked On Sports Atlanta app, now available on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You get the same great local coverage 24/7 for free. All you got to do is download the Locked On Sports Atlanta app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. So our first question comes from Clement. He says, "Hey, Aaron, these are two questions from last week that I did not get to on last week's episode, but they're still somewhat applicable." He asks, "Everybody seems to expect this offense to get better with Ridder, but since Mariota is under pressure almost every drop back, is it better and is better at extending plays with his legs than Ridder, and the offensive line can't really set us in a position for a good passing game? Don't you think Ridder would struggle even more than Mariota?" And then Rise Up asks, all these come from the Discord, by the way, "Hey, Aaron, I feel like Mariota's ability to throw and run, he had the throw to Bird in the first quarter and the one to London late in the game." Again, this is referring to the Carolina game. "Played a big part in the Falcons' victory on Sunday. What are your thoughts on that statement?" So I think for your first question, Clement, yeah, you're right. The Falcons' pass protection has not been good this year. I think it's certainly fair to question how Ridder would hold up in that, given that the handful of issues we saw from him in the preseason were mostly due to pressure, right? Where he made some questionable decisions, some bad throws in those situations. And so I think that's more than fair to wonder how Ridder would fare in it. I do think you can argue, and again, whether you buy this argument or not, it's up to the individual. You could argue, though, that you offset that somewhat because Ridder may be better at processing and seeing the field and reading differences and reading coverages based off of his preseason performance and what Mariota is, and throwing with that timing and precision and getting the ball out quicker, right? So that the pressure is not going to get there earlier. And, again, that's weird to say, given that Ridder is a rookie and is inexperienced. And again, what he did in the preseason isn't necessarily automatic what he's going to do in the regular season. But it did seem like, based off of his preseason tape and based off what we've seen from Mariota, Ridder's processing seems to be he's much more capable of operating the quick game than Mariota seems to be, or at least theoretically Ridder has the capacity for that. So that may be something that could offset that. Again, we will only learn once we see him on the field. And to answer Rise Up's question, yeah, I do think Mariota's mobility, I don't recall the two plays that you're referring to off the top of my head, just because I can only remember the most recent game. There's too much info, too much data in this brain, so I have to remove data from previous games. So I don't know which plays off the top of my head that you're referring to. I probably would have had I answered this question on last week's Q&A. But yeah, one of the things you've heard me consistently praise Mariota for is his mobility, his ability to extend plays, use his legs to create off structure. We saw that with the Tyler Algier play that we referred to earlier in this game. Yeah, I do think that's something that Mariota has over Ridder. Although, again, you could make the argument that Ridder, that was something I had question marks about Ridder, that I don't know if he's really great off structure. He's more of a pocket quarterback, all that stuff. But in the preseason, we did see him do a little bit more, a lot more when it came to improvisational and extending plays and creating off structure. The Jared Bernhardt touchdown is a great example of that, but there were a handful of other plays. So I'm not as sure as I was maybe 4 months ago that the gap between Mariota and Ridder there is as significant as it is. I know that wasn't specifically what you were talking about, Rise Up, but that is something potentially that Ridder could do at a reasonably high level, if not at the same level as Mariota as well. So, obviously we're still just guessing at how good Ridder could potentially be, and until we see him on the football field, we don't really know. So, I'm not saying any of this stuff to sway anybody. I'm just sitting here. We're talking, right? So let's get to Harry and Gary's question from the Discord. Hello, Aaron. In the offseason, you made a video critiquing Arthur Smith's coaching and play calling. Do you think he has improved, and would you rank him in the top half of the league as a coach? Thank you. Yes, I think his play calling and coaching has significantly improved. Sure, I would rank him in the top 16. Like, is he 15? Is he 12? Is he 11? I don't know. But like I remember I used to call Dirk Cutter the Andy Dalton of play callers, meaning that, like, if you put the right supporting cast around him, like, you can win games with him, but you're not going to like win in January with Andy Dalton, nor are you going to win in January with Dirk Cutter calling plays. And I think I've said this on the podcast before, but I feel like I called Arthur Smith like the Jimmy Garoppolo of play callers. At least that's what I'm working with. I don't know if I said it on the podcast, which is like a guy is similar sort of dynamic, but like he's going to give you a lot more than what Andy Dalton's giving. Like, we know Jimmy Garoppolo can go out there and play reasonably well in January and win you football games. Although, when it comes to winning Super Bowls, maybe he's not going to give you what you want there, thus prompting teams like the 49ers to go trade for a Trey Lance or something along those lines. So, like, that's kind of where I'm at with Arthur Smith and his play calling. And, again, that sounds like a knock on him, which I guess technically it is, because I'm not sitting here saying he's the Patrick Mahomes of play calling. But, I feel like that's substantially improved from where he was last year, where I don't even know if Smith was on Cutter's level. I don't know if he was even Andy Dalton's level last year when it came to his play calling, which brings us to our final question, coming from 00 Divine Knives on the Discord. He says, "Hey, Aaron, I felt like a lot of people after the game said we should have ran the ball more. Is there any truth to this? Because I'm not sure." And this is a question for this week. So, yeah, I think there were a handful of plays that you could nitpick and say we should have ran it, or we could have ran it there, a 2nd and 8 here, a 1st and goal here. But in my opinion, that's just nitpicking. For those of you that are relatively new to the podcast, my general philosophy when it comes to being critical of play calling is, like, I think it's fair to criticize individual plays, especially 3rd, 4th downs, red zone plays, those sort of do or die situations where you kind of need a good play call in order to help your team's chance to win. But, at the end of the day, if we're talking about a handful of plays, and like in the Chargers game, I'm sure you can nitpick 4 or 5 plays, but, in a game that featured 60 play calls, that's less than 10%. And that means that over 90% of the play calls were just fine. And, that in a school would be an A grade. I don't know how the grading system is for those of you that are overseas, but here in America, like, at least when I was in school, I don't know what it is now, but like 92% or higher was an A grade. And so that would be an A grade. And so I try not to get too bent out of shape over a handful of plays. I think, if it's something that consistently shows up week after week, then it becomes a lot more worthy of criticism. Like last year, one of my criticisms of Arthur Smith's play calling was how he was not really designing any red zone plays for Kyle Pitts last year outside of lob plays. That has not been an issue this year. The problem isn't the play calling. The design of the plays aren't really getting the ball to Kyle Pitts this year. It's been the quarterback play, which has been less of an issue in recent weeks, which is part of the reason why, Kyle Pitts is scoring touchdowns all of a sudden. Like, for example, Arthur Smith uses 2-man route concepts, which I think it's fair to criticize him for, because I know people used to criticize Dirk Cutter a lot for this and say, like, this is the reason why we need to fire Dirk Cutter. And I remember when I watched Arthur Smith's offense in January 2021, I was like, and I tweeted this out, I was like, if you hated the 2-man route concepts of Dirk Cutter, you are not going to be happy with Arthur Smith's offense. And we've seen that. And, when you're running the football effectively, when you're able to dial up these shot plays from time to time and you're hitting them, like, that type of offense is a non-issue. Right. And so that was, to me, really the issue I had when people used to use that criticism against Dirk Cutter. It was like, to me, that's less of a, conceptual issue. It's more of a lack of execution issue, in my humble opinion. So, like, I tend to be much more forgiving of play calling than probably your average internet analyst is. at least in my experience. I tend to be much more critical of like the conceptual things, like, running 4 verticals in the red zone. Like, okay, like this is this is a nothing play call, like it just, I don't know. Stuff like that is what really bothers me more so than like the specific, hey, you should have ran it here, you should have threw it here, those types of things. Again, there are times when those issues will spring up from time to time, but probably over the course of a season, you may only hear maybe like me talking about that stuff 3 or 4 times. Like the only time I can recall being super critical of Arthur Smith's play calling on an individual play was in that Dallas game where there was like a 4th down and he ran like basically, a know nothing concept. He didn't run a concept. He just basically run down the field and get open. And I remember talking about it on a podcast back then. And like that was like the one time where I was like, that's a terrible play call. I'm gonna spend time on the podcast complaining about that one play call, because in that situation it's a 4th down, you need it, all right, and you're just basically running a nothing play, just like run down the field and try to get open, and Matt Ryan will throw you the football, and it's like that's you got to give us something, you got to give us a concept or something like that. And there's been a couple of times this season where I've seen those types of plays, but like I'm not going to get too mad at Arthur Smith for that. He's working with the best he can. And so when you ask about his coaching ability, going back to the previous question from Harry and Gary, like, yeah, I feel like Arthur Smith has done a great job, accentuating the strengths of this roster while trying his best to minimize the weaknesses. And they have a ton of weaknesses, which is, we're not going to get into it on today's episode here at the end of the episode, but that's part of the reason why, like, my expectations, in addition to being that negative Nancy, aka Mr. Drew, like part of the reason why my expectations are tempered, and so like I'm not as high after the wins, or I'm not as low after the losses as many of my peers are, is because like I look at this roster and I go like, they're not terrible. Clearly they're not terrible, but like this is not the idealized version of this team. Like we're probably at least like 2 off seasons away, particularly on offense, from having like the idealized version of this team. Probably the same thing on defense as well. So like that's part of the reason why, like, to me, there's no sense of urgency. Like that leading up to the trade deadline, I was like, I don't see the urgency. Like we're still at year 1 of a 3-year rebuild. So why are we trying to sit here and take shortcuts? But that's a conversation for another day. We'll probably get more into that closer to the end of the season when we can truly evaluate the season as a whole. But like that's kind of how I feel about it right now. But I hope those answers your guys' question. We'll see what the Falcons do, with the pistol and shotgun. We'll see what they do on Thursday night. Of course, tomorrow we'll be doing a crossover Thursday with Locked On Panthers host Julian Council, giving you the preview and the lowdown on everything that you need for that game. If you want to submit questions for future Q&As, you can do so via Twitter, via Facebook at Locked On Falcons, via email to lockedonfalcons@mail.com. You can leave a comment here on the Locked On Falcons YouTube channel, or you can also hit me up on the Discord, as so many of you guys have done. The link is in the description below to the Locked On Falcons Discord, guys. Of course, tomorrow's crossover Thursday, and then Friday's episode will just basically be the rapid reaction, and then we'll see what we do Monday. We'll probably have a chance to do an early All-22 review Monday after I watch the film, probably from Sunday or whatever again. But these short weeks throw off the schedule, so I'll figure something out in terms of the exact schedule and let you guys know exactly what the plan is for next week's shows leading up to that. But we'll probably get more into that by Friday. I'll have a clear idea of what I want to do. So guys, really appreciate it